Here we bring you some great stories around resilience and reinvention to help us through these very difficult COVID-19 times. I'm Teddy Katz, my partner in the Resiliency Project, PJ Kwong. Hey, welcome, PJ. Welcome again today.
Teddy, thank you so much. This is so much fun. This is probably my favorite day in the week.
Mine too. And when you think about swimming, PJ, what names come to mind for you?
Well, I want to say like Michael Phelps, Mark Spitz, Penny Oleksiak. Boy, that made me really super interested in swimming. Those are the top three that I can think of.
What about the name Stephanie Dixon? What comes to mind when you think of Stephanie?
Trick question, because I actually know about Stephanie in lots of other ways, because I am, an announcer at the Olympics and Paralympic Games. So most recently, I was aware of Stephanie, although I never got a chance to meet her at the Pan American Games last year in Lima. So I know about Stephanie.
And Stephanie and I go way back as well, covering her and her career, but also some of her time as an ambassador in sports around the Pan Am Games in Toronto. Stephanie is one of the best Paralympic swimmers that Canada has ever produced. She's a member of the Canada Sports Hall of Fame. She's a member of the Order of Canada. She's Canada's chef de mission for the Tokyo Paralympics. Stephanie won 19 Paralympic medals in her career, a career that spanned 3 different Paralympic Games from 2000 to 2008. And maybe, as you're about to hear today, Stephanie should actually win her 20th medal for the way she's kept her different business interests going during these difficult COVID-19 times. Stephanie, you're going to hear, is quite an amazing storyteller, and she joins us today from her home in the Yukon. Welcome to the Resiliency Project, Stephanie.
Hi, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. We are really looking forward to our discussion today. I was mentioning off the top that you wear all of these different hats in your different business interests right now. You're a public speaker that's very much in demand. You travel extensively across the country normally. You're a swim coach in the Yukon. You are a personal fitness trainer. You're Canada's chef de mission for the Tokyo Paralympics. All of that could have come to a screeching halt with the pandemic. But as I mentioned, maybe you should get a 20th medal for the resiliency you've shown to keep your businesses going. Can you tell us some of the unique things that you've done? Let's go and talk about, for instance, you as a swimming coach. What have you done to keep your swimmers in the water?
Yeah, I mean, things did come to a screeching halt at first. I mean, I think that was true of everybody with the pandemic, and everyone wants to be safe and contribute towards making sure that we're getting COVID-19 under control. So, we were at the pool one day and the pool was completely shut down the next. And I have a master's swim club of about 120 adult swimmers. And we have 3 coaches, and we normally swim from September to June. So in the middle of March, we were, getting towards the end of our season, but we had a couple months to go, and the pool was no longer an option. So we wanted to make sure that our swimmers were staying healthy and active. And for adult swimmers, it's a lot about keeping pain under control. A lot of our swimmers have arthritis or some kind of health issue that they're using swimming to maintain their health and keep things under control. A lot of our swimmers, it's for their mental health, just making sure that they have a place to kind of reflect and to get all of that negative energy out. And so keeping our athletes healthy and active was pretty crucial for us. So a couple of things was that we have a lot of lakes here, but they were still covered in ice and snow. So getting into the lakes right away was not an option. So I started to draw upon my physical fitness training skills in order to keep people active. So just started posting some challenges, like a 30-day ab challenge, just asking our swimmers, what are you guys doing? What are your ideas? And then the ice started to melt. Thank goodness. And around, I think we were May 5th, there were still chunks of ice all over. And we decided to jump in. And ever since then, I've been trying to encourage more and more of the swimmers to come in the lakes with me. And now, I mean, we're sitting at like 24-degree weather, and the lakes, I would say, are probably around 16 degrees. So we have a big group of swimmers jumping in the lakes. We're posting a lot of information about staying safe in the open water, and then trying to keep things fun and interesting with swim bingo. So I've made some bingo cards, and there's different challenges for the swimmers to complete. And some of it's in the water, some of it's out of the water, and just trying to keep the community connected, because I think that that's one of the biggest challenges in COVID, is to keep that sense of community while we're physically distancing. So we have an online platform that we've been communicating with.
When you talk about going in in the water as the ice is melting, all I can think about is how cold that would be.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Oh, the first time was really cold. It hurts. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat this at all. It was hard. The first time, I think it was about 4-degree weather. It was in the Yukon River, turns into a beautiful lake for part of it. And we jumped in there the first time because it was the first place to start to thaw out. So it's important to have wetsuits. I personally don't love wetsuits. I feel it's very restricting, and my big shoulders tend to get quite stiff in a wetsuit. So I like to go with a wetsuit, but I encourage my swimmers, because the water is quite cold, and there is risk of hypothermia. So wetsuits, you get neoprene swim caps, gloves, booties, swimming along the shore, so you have a quick exit, and also to swim in groups. So we are definitely putting safety measures in place to make sure everyone is safe.
What did you do with respect to your fitness classes and trying to keep them going? And where are you holding them now? And how do you keep people safe there?
Yeah. So another group that there was a lot of attention to make sure that they were staying healthy and active were our Special Olympians here in the Yukon. And we have an amazing Special Olympics contingency, very strong up here in the Yukon. And so I was approached kind of a return to sport type of fitness program for those athletes, because there was a good 2 months where everyone was sedentary and there was nothing going on. We couldn't meet in groups. And so then we're like, okay, if we're going to start to get people moving again, we have to do it very slowly, because we don't want to have any injuries, because you can't go from zero to hero. You gotta kind of work your way back up the ladder, and to make sure that we're operating underneath the COVID-19 regulations. So we had some meetings, and people came up with lots of ideas. We tried to cover anything and everything we could possibly think of. So there's waivers to make sure that the athletes don't feel any symptoms of COVID at all, and they sign a waiver every single time they come to a practice. We're keeping 2 meters apart. A maximum. So in the Yukon right now, we have a maximum of 10 people can gather in a group. So we'll have 3 coaches and a maximum of 7 athletes. Making sure that the mats and equipment that they're using, only one athlete touches a set of equipment. So if you have a mat, that's your mat. You can't share a mat, and everything is spaced out. So we're not using things like balls where we'd be passing it back and forth and having multiple people touch the same thing. And then also making sure we're having fun. That's the thing right now, is we're all focused so much on staying safe and healthy. We can't forget to have the fun part of it as well. So we're trying to be creative. We go outside into a field in the Yukon and make sure we're getting that fresh air, the vitamin D that we have so much of right now up here. and yeah, it's been going really well.
What about your keynote addresses that you do? You know, you do a lot of public speaking. You generally are traveling. Right now, you're restricted in terms of the traveling that you can do. Do you have any interesting stories and interesting Zoom stories, horror stories? You know, a lot of people might be able to relate to that.
Oh, I think that right now, like, Zoom is just the hottest thing in the world, and in my business, it's been no different. So I couldn't travel anymore. I lost a lot of speaking engagements because we simply couldn't gather and meet and travel. But people get creative, and Zoom is all the rage. So a lot of my keynote addresses have actually moved on to Zoom. And there's been a couple of minor technical glitches, and it's usually, which I'm sure most people can relate to, people forgetting to unmute themselves, and you see someone asking a question and you can't hear them, and I can't read lips. So just trying to get those little glitches under control. But fortunately for me, I don't have any horror stories. I love hearing the stories where people only put on their professional shirt and then they're in their boxers and get up for some reason and people realize they're only half dressed. Those are my favorite stories. But yeah, it's worked out really well on Zoom. It's been great. It's reduced a carbon footprint, which means a lot to me and should mean a lot to all of us as we tackle climate change. It's better for my health. I'm not traveling for a couple of days, recovering jet lag and just the exhaustion of being on a plane. So I've really appreciated being able to do keynote addresses and to be an advocate right from my own home. It's been, I think we're actually going to continue to see a lot more gatherings, meetings, keynote speeches happening from our homes and online, because there's a lot of benefit to it.
I got a quick question. Jose Lanouette, one of our regulars, has a comment about your bingo game.
She loves the bingo game.
Is an option. Figures Jose would see that. You're changing lives, Stephanie. I just wanted you to know.
I think there is something so liberating about being naked in the water. And I don't believe we need to be an exhibitionist or scare children or anything like that. We have so many lakes up here, and you can kind of go down the shore a little ways to find a private spot. But to jump into a lake in the Yukon and be in your birthday suit, I really truly believe there is nothing more healing and magical and liberating. So I do encourage all of my swimmers to find a private spot and go for it. And I've converted a lot of people into believing that this is a magical healing experience. And it's so funny for me. I like to skinny dip quite often in a nice private spot, but my hands, I have Raynaud's, so I don't know if anyone else suffers from that, but my hands go white very quickly. So while I love cold water, my hands do not. So I put on neoprene gloves, and then that's all I'm wearing. And then I go for my swim. So I probably look a little bit silly, but yeah, it's beautiful and magical out here. And when we're talking about our mental health and feeling free, I think we just have to put our pride and feeling ridiculous aside because it's worth it. It's so worth it.
Well, I'm glad Jose brought it up.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Jose. And and comment. And if anybody else has any comments, by all means, we love to make this as interactive as possible. So send your comments or questions our way, and PJ will make sure that we try and get them as part of the broadcast. Now, when I talk about you and your different hats that you're wearing, Stephanie, one of the other hats you're wearing is chef de mission for Canada's Paralympic team heading hopefully to Tokyo next summer. How difficult a period has this been for the athletes from what you're hearing and your interaction with them?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to truly comprehend the roller coaster of emotions that our athletes are going through. My heart goes out to our athletes. We've never seen anything like this at all. And as an athlete, you just have such a laser focus on performance and your training, and everything you're doing is from a lens of how will this affect my performance. So when all of that comes to a stop, it's really hard to feel grounded, like you have an anchor. You know what you're supposed to do when you get up in the morning, your purpose, your identity. For some people, and this was from a personal reflection, feeling your self-worth is attached to your performance, and that's not necessarily a healthy outlook, but it is the case for a lot of us athletes, and so it goes very deep. It's not just about not being able to get out and exercise. It's your whole world and your identity is wrapped up in being an athlete and performing and trying to inspire people around you. So when that's all taken away, I'm very concerned for athletes' mental health in all of this. So we have had task forces from our Canadian sports system get together specifically for different areas of how to manage COVID in the sports system. And one of the task forces specifically was for mental health. How are we helping our athletes get through this, creating resources, making sure that they still feel connected and supported? So that was a big thing for me, was to reach out to the athletes. I sent out a couple of video messages just to make sure that they still knew that they were supported, whether they were able to train or not. We believe in them, and we will figure out a way to get through this together. But for each athlete, this has been a very individual journey. So different sports are affected very differently. Somebody who's a runner who can get outside and run by themselves, they can still continue to train and be healthy and safe in COVID. Whereas pools have been shut down, all sporting facilities have been shut down. So if you're in any sport where you're gathering in a group, which is a lot of sports, swimming, basketball, you're not able to train at all. So I think that people have gotten creative. A lot of athletes have gotten creative and created online workouts, or just been working out from home. And the most creative solution that I saw, which is, I think that in the beginning it's so challenging, but what Hard Times does, it does fuel creativity, which is awesome. And so Danielle Kisser, one of our national team swimmers, she built a pool in her backyard, with the help of her family. She built a pool that she was able to tether herself and swim in place. And it's absolutely incredible. The resilience and the creativity when we face adversity. But, that's only really possible when you have the right support. And I truly believe that resilience can come about in a very unhealthy way. If you're dealing with some kind of trauma or difficulty and you don't have support, you might become resilient, but you're surviving and not thriving. We really need that support around us. So for our athletes, we make sure that they know they're supported, they're believed in, and a lot of our athletes already know that a support system is key to so they have good support around them. And so a lot of them have been able to channel the difficult time into some kind of creative solution.
When you look ahead to those games next summer now, postponed for now for this summer, and now looking ahead to next summer, is there something that keeps you up at night when you think about those games next summer right now?
That's such a good question. I think that the hardest thing for me will be, how do we support our athletes, like I said, on an individual level? Because some athletes, in terms of their training, will be able to go to 2021 and not have had a lot of their training affected, whereas some athletes are still not able, as of now, to be training. So that's a long time. That's a lifetime to an athlete to be out of training. When you get sick for a couple days, you think, how am I going to make up this time? I'm getting behind. So to be out of training for months for some of our athletes, they are going to be heading into the games with a very fragmented year prior. And even now heading into the games, there's still so many things left in place to make sure that training can be done in a safe and healthy way. And we might, open things up, get back to training, and then realize, oh, no, there's a breakout. We need to retreat again. So there's so many athletes who will be dealing in less than ideal circumstances mentally and physically, while other athletes have had tons of support and were able to keep training. So I think it's a matter of figuring out, how do I, as chef, figure out a way to lead our team in a way that's supportive of everybody when each athlete is in such a different circumstance. We have some athletes who are immune compromised, and we have to be an athlete's health and well-being comes before performance. Absolutely, hands down. So our athletes' health and well-being will be our first priority and concern. And then after that, to figure out in a safe and healthy way, how do we support each athlete to their best performance? And for our athletes who haven't really skipped a beat, we want to be there for them and encourage them. And our athletes who have had so many struggles in terms of trying to get back to training and gather and meet with their coaches, we want to make sure enough resources are provided for them to come to the games and still have a positive experience.
How difficult do you see it being to host, whether it's the Olympics or the Paralympics next year, if there's no vaccine for COVID-19 in time for next summer?
I do not at all envy the job of our medical team who are making those decisions. So from the International Olympic Committee, Paralympic Committee, the organizing committee, and then from our Canadian team, everyone has medical committees that are making recommendations and making those decisions. So I do not envy those positions when people have to make those tough calls. And I think right now there are just so many different, I know, especially from a Canadian standpoint, there are so many different plans being thought out right now. So situation A, situation B, situation C, depending on what the climate is with COVID heading into the games. So, planning a games for if there's no vaccine, planning a games for if there's going to be no spectators, planning a games for if everything's going to be going on as it normally would, and for us to figure out how do we support our athletes in every possible case scenario. So, for me, I, as chef, want to support our athletes and make sure that everything is there that they need, but from a medical standpoint and to make decisions on how things will operate within a games, I feel so fortunate I don't have to make those decisions because it's so challenging. I think there's a lot of COVID that's so unknown to everybody, and our medical teams are making the best decisions that they can.
And when you look ahead to the games, and you mentioned the athletes that might have underlying medical conditions or might be immunocompromised, what advice might you have? Might they get that might be a bit different than some of the other athletes? If, for instance, if there is no vaccine in time for next summer.
I think the biggest message is every single athlete needs to take care of themselves, their well-being first, and that we support them as humans, healthy humans before performance, and that they, it's their well-being, hands down. Well-being comes first. So athletes need to make tough decisions, and it's hard. It's hard if you're choosing between your health and your dreams. That's not an easy thing to ask somebody to do. But we want to make sure that our athletes don't feel any additional pressure for producing performances when they need to be taking care of their health. And so we just want to make sure athletes know that we value them and support them as humans first and foremost. And then once they're healthy and safe and can make those decisions that they need to make, then how do we help them have the best performances of a lifetime? But the thing about someone who's immune compromised is they're used to living with that every single day. So pandemic or no pandemic, they're immune compromised, and the world can be a very scary and dangerous place in terms of their health. So I actually would be looking to those athletes because they already have those systems in place to keep themselves safe, and to wonder what do they already do in their day-to-day lives. I'm sure like the washing of the hands, keeping your distance, all the things that we've been recommended, wearing the masks. But those athletes, they're not only high performance athletes, but they're also used to every single day keeping their health and wellness as their first priority. So I think that they're experts in that area, and we can actually learn from them. And then for all Paralympians, adversity is not an unfamiliar place. For all of us Paralympians, we've dealt with an incredible amount of adversity and difficulty in our lives, both mentally, physically, and socially. And so I'm really excited to see how all of our Paralympians have been handling COVID-19. And I think they can be great examples for the rest of our country.
Stephanie, there's a great question here that speaks to health. And this is Alf Crespo, another regular of ours, who wants to know if you have any tips about food and about athletes staying healthy and staying away from junk food. Or as he says, another great comment, how can we flatten the other curve?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that, you know, we're thinking so much, how do we keep socially distanced? But what we really also need to recognize is when we do socially distance, we're isolating ourselves, and that really affects our mental health. And then we turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms when we're having struggles with our mental health. So eating unhealthy foods, I think, is a very common go-to when we're feeling stressed out in our lives. And I think that in COVID, everyone's experiencing additional stress in their life. So it's easy to have extra chips and ice cream and go for the unhealthy meals when we're not feeling very good. So I think it's all about being intentional and having a plan. So for me, when I go to the grocery store, I need to have a plan, or I'm just going to grab what looks good. And if it's in the house as well, if I come home and I'm stressed out, not had a great day, we're going to go for the easy, quick snacks instead of making healthy meals. So I try not to have too much junk food on hand at home because it's just too easy to go for it. And then being very intentional and having a plan when you go to the grocery store. So know what meals you're planning to make that week, and then buy the specific ingredients. And it's just all about being intentional, because in the moment when we're stressed, we're going to do a quick fix that makes us feel good. That's human. That's all of us. So I think we just need to be a little bit organized, and then also be gentle with ourselves when we don't. This is a really, really tough time right now. And it's easy to beat ourselves up. And we're seeing all over social media how people are taking advantage of COVID-19. I'm getting in shape. I'm learning a language. I'm doing all these things. And that's great. And we should be encouraging that, but also recognizing that is just a very small sliver of what's happening. And a lot of us are really struggling, and we don't necessarily post that on social media. So we think, oh, everyone else is doing all these things. They're getting in shape and learning languages, where I'm just sitting here eating chips. and so we need to remember that you're not alone, and what we see on social media is not the whole picture. And so be gentle with ourselves when we do grab for the bag of chips, because we've had just a really hard day. And, you know, for parents who are taking care of kids at home, as well as working from home, schooling from home, I don't know how you manage all of that. So we have to be gentle when we do have times where we don't have the healthiest coping mechanisms, because we've never experienced this. This is really tough.
Stephanie, I wonder, as you talk about the resiliency of everybody, that, you know, and that everybody's showing in their own way, I wonder if you could take us all back to how things all began for you and some of the early days for you. And, you know, tell me a little bit about how you found swimming and the Paralympics.
Oh, those pictures. I love it. So I grew up with one leg, and when I was growing up, I didn't know the Paralympics existed. And I think that I was just so concerned growing up I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. And I wanted just to be treated like a normal kid. So I really resisted anything that was had any kind of disability focus. I didn't even want to talk about disability, and just try and fit in the best that I could. And I didn't realize that I was really doing a disservice to myself, because I do have a disability, and it's okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And later on in life now, I know that I should be. I am proud of my body and what it can do for me, but growing up was really challenging. And so I came to the Paralympics a little bit later on, once I had already started competitive swimming, and I was swimming against athletes who didn't have a disability. And I was at a swim meet, maybe I was, 13 years old, and an official at the meet told me about the Paralympic Games, and I resisted it so hard, because all I heard was, "You're different, you're special, you need to be in a different category." Like, to a teenage ears, like, that's all I heard, and I didn't want to have any part in it. So I'm very lucky to have had my coach and my parents who encouraged me to give it a try. And they said, if you don't like para sport and meeting other athletes with disabilities, then that's okay. But you should give it a try, because they knew that I would find a community that I could identify with. And it's not about being in a special category. Parasport is about a level playing field. And they saw that when my teenage brain couldn't comprehend anything other than, I don't want to be different. I don't want to stand out.
You just want to fit in. You just want to fit in.
Exactly, like any teenager does. And so I took their advice, and I did get classified into a para category, and I attended my first competition. It was a national level competition for athletes who had disability, or swimmers with a disability. And I just had this image in my mind that athletes with disabilities were participating and not competing, and all of these misconceptions that have existed for so long. Me, as someone with a disability, I had those misconceptions too. I thought everyone else is participating, but I'm competing. And then when I went to my first competition with other para athletes, everyone wants a level playing field. Everyone wanted to be competitive and show the world what they could do, and not be felt sorry for. I felt a community of athletes who were just like me, and it was a very big eye-opening moment. And I think that then and there, I was cured of my disability phobia, thinking it was this bad thing that I had to distance myself from. And I wanted to be a para athlete. And I recognized that whether I'm swimming in a lane beside somebody who has one leg or two legs, it didn't matter. We're all there to try and better ourselves. And when you're beside somebody else who's also trying to be the best they can be, it inspires you. And so at that point, I decided to pursue both streams. I competed against athletes without disability, as well as started to pursue my dreams of competing at the Paralympic Games.
I saw you recently mentioned in a post that you put out for the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame that your Canadian moment was Terry Fox and his Marathon of Hope. I wonder if you could talk about, I think it's very apropos to ask this right now, how come that moment resonated so much for you when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, so I was born in '84, and so growing up in the late '80s, early '90s, you didn't see people with disability. So on the media, anytime you saw disability, it was in some kind of position of being a victim or being weak or someone who needed help, but you didn't see people with disability being empowered or being looked at as heroes or inspirations. And so that's where a lot of my disability phobia, I'll call it, came from. And I just didn't want to be associated with anything to do with disability. And then we learned about the Terry Fox Run. So, growing up, my school I actually went to Terry Fox Public School. Such a coincidence and so random, but my elementary school was called the Terry Fox Public School. And so we did the Terry Fox Run every year. And it was the first time ever that I saw somebody with a disability being looked at as a hero. And so I learned all about Terry Fox, and we watched videos and saw how he ran, and other kids would try and mimic the run that he did. And growing up, I wore a prosthetic leg, and I ran the same way that Terry Fox did. And so I felt like a cool kid, and I felt like I was being accepted, and people were looking at me like I was more similar to Terry, and how we had something to talk about. And it was a really pivotal moment in my life, seeing somebody I could look up to who I felt I could identify with. And we all need role models. All of us do. Yeah.
You've gone on to do some pretty amazing things in the pool in terms of 19 Paralympic medals over your stellar career. But what I also find interesting is what you've done sort of outside of the pool, and the fact that, you've done some pretty amazing things like rock climbing, ice climbing, all these other things. I wonder where that comes from. Why that is something that you've done, and all the different things that you've done.
I think, when I was put into a pool at a very young age, and on land, I wore a prosthetic leg, ride crutches. And then when I went into the water as a child, I felt empowered. It was just me and my body, and I saw what my body could do. It felt beautiful. It felt strong. It felt empowered. And ever since then, I've wanted to recreate those moments. So I have obviously spent a lot of time in the pool recreating moments of feeling like a mermaid and seeing how powerful my body could be. But then I was interested to take it outside of the pool. And I think because disability still has an undertone in society of being something that's unfortunate or less capable, you're less powerful, I think that gives those moments when I do find my body in a position of power and empowering me, it just makes it so much sweeter because it just gives me more evidence that all those misconceptions are wrong. And also an example to the world. I think that the more people with disabilities, and that's why I love the Paralympic Games so much, it creates this platform to turn these misconceptions on their heads and to show that all bodies are powerful and strong. So I've sought out different ways of feeling powerful in my body. So rock climbing, cross-country skiing. Right now, I'm obsessed with mountain biking. I love it so much. And it's just all ways that my body is showing me just how incredible it is and what it can do. Because I very rarely fall into this with myself, but I fell into a situation where I thought, I can't mountain bike. You can see my bike right behind me. I thought, I can't do that. And up here in Whitehorse, the two most common sports are cross-country skiing and mountain biking because we have world-class trails here. And so I got into the cross-country skiing, but thought, I can't mountain bike. It's not a one-legged activity. And it wasn't until 2 summers ago, I had been up here for 6 years and just thought, nope, that's not something I can do. And I had a friend who just wouldn't accept that and thought, let's figure it out. Let's give it a go. So we got an e-bike, an e-mountain bike that I have a bit of a motor assist when I'm pedaling. I'm clipped in because I only have the one leg, so I have to clip in to my pedals to get it around, which is pretty terrifying all in its own. And then just figuring out the different techniques about weight transfer and leaning. It's a little bit different for me, but I could do it. And it was incredible to have this support around me that believed in me more than I did in myself, because I had just tucked mountain biking away as something that was not for one-legged people. And sometimes it takes somebody else being a little bit pushy and getting you outside your comfort zone, because now mountain biking is the way that I'm exploring the Yukon, and it's taking me to places I never thought I could go.
How did you end up in the Yukon? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, my story is very similar to almost everyone else who has moved up here, is that we come up for a visit. You think it'll be a really neat place to see, and then you just don't want to leave. So I came up here to visit. My best friend in university was from Whitehorse. So I came up to visit and just fell in love with it and thought, there's no better place in the world to live. It's a very intentional community, as there's more people that have moved here on purpose than people who are even from here. So people who all love the outdoors, who want to live as a community, support each other, live in the woods, live a life that respects the outdoors and the land, and be very conscious that we live with animals. We live with grizzly bears in our backyard, and fox and moose, and to want to live in that kind of environment. So it's a beautiful community, and it's quite a magical place when you're skiing under the northern lights. It's pretty incredible.
Do you know what? I have a question for you. First of all, Bruce Simpson says one medal would have been impressive, but 19, good grief. The other thing is that Jose wants to know what your next challenge is to yourself. I mean, we've got this great picture of you on the bike. So what is that next challenge?
Well, on the mountain bike, I was really looking forward to doing some more challenging trails this summer. So I've gotten onto some black trails. So in mountain biking, you have the easier green trails, moderate blue trails, difficult black trails, and then very scary double black diamond trails. And so I've graduated to the black trails this summer. So I've been out challenging myself on my bike quite a bit. What else? Challenges for myself. Very recently, it was the last year, I decided to get into freediving. So when I talk about feeling empowered and like a mermaid in the water, I wanted to spend more time underwater. So I took a course in freediving, which is like scuba diving. So you're going under the water, but you don't have an oxygen tank. So you learn how to hold your breath and to be able to stay under for minutes at a time. And I love the idea of it because it takes a lot of relaxation. Yoga is really important to just get the relaxation and flexibility that you need. And then it's very meditative. And I think we're in a time right now of a lot of stimulus and a lot of stress. And so meditation has been something. I was very inspired by my brother to get into meditation. He's been into it for a very long time. And I thought that that's something that can really help me to manage my own mental health and stress. And so with freediving, we're combining, my love of the water, as well as relaxation, meditation, and yoga. So it's kind of all of my favorite things combined into one. And so I would love to get better and to improve my freediving moving forward. And it's been a lifelong dream of mine to swim with blue whales. So I'm hoping to get, more proficient at holding my breath and staying relaxed. So if I ever find the blue whales out there in Mexico or in Sri Lanka, that I'll be able to stay under and swim with them for a while.
Wow. You just painted a great picture for Jose and for all of us watching.
You bet.
When you talk about the Paralympics, Stephanie, and what you're hoping the Paralympics can do to sort of open up people's eyes to the amazing abilities out there, and maybe reframing the whole way that we look at abilities and this whole question. Where do you see things being right now in terms of the way the Paralympics are perceived compared to when you started competing in 2000 to where we are now, and how far you see us being able to advance on that front?
Yeah. I think that the Paralympics in particular, it's night and day from when I very first started. So when I went to my first games, most people didn't know what the Paralympics were, and saw it as a participation event. Whereas nowadays, the average Canadian absolutely knows what the Paralympics are and knows that it's a very high performance event. And a lot of people will look at the Olympics and Paralympics, it's one games, or call a Paralympian an Olympian just because they see it as one games. And I think that the danger in the advancements and the awareness that the Paralympics has, we will see in 2021 Paralympics on prime time television, historic coverage of the games across Canada. And it's incredible. And people are knowing who Paralympians are. And it's incredible. And the danger is to think that is showing us how far we've come in inclusion and accessibility outside of sport. So I think that the Paralympics are really important. They create this massive platform across the world to showcase abilities, like you're saying there, Teddy, as well as what bodies can do, what it means to be successful. But we cannot mistake success at a Paralympic Games for what's happening in everyday life. And so I think, right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, and when we're talking about Indigenous rights here in Canada, it's complicated and it takes time. So we want to celebrate wins when we see things moving forward, but we also need to recognize that this is a long journey and we're in it for the long haul. So, we're talking about inclusion, diversity, accessibility. We've come a long way, and I feel that it's going in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do, and we need to make sure that we're looking at the Paralympic Games as a great example, for how far we've come, but also outside of the Paralympic Games, whether it's in employment or just accessibility of buildings, in the media. How many people with disability are we seeing in the media? And for me, success will be when people aren't amazed that I'm riding a bike. And success will be when you have somebody with a disability who's your doctor, your teacher, your lawyer, and it doesn't come as a surprise to you. And people don't say, wow, that's so amazing. Look what you're doing, for doing everyday things. So, at a Paralympic level, it's people with disability doing amazing things, which is incredible. We need to celebrate that. But I think for me, success will be when people with disabilities are in the media and they're doing everyday things, and people don't think twice about it, and we normalize disability in our society.
Well, what that's such a great answer, Stephanie, and it reminds me actually last week I was part of a panel discussion with other members of the media, where it was all about a conversation about how para sport is covered in the media in Canada. And, the question was if there is still too much focus on the disability and not enough focus on the athleticism at this point in time. And, how athletes sort of perceive the way the coverage has evolved, and whether or not it's at the level that people really want right now. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, every athlete, whether you have a disability or not, has a story. And I think that it's when you know somebody on a personal level that's what, you really want to root for somebody. So if you think about the athletes that we know from the past who've really stuck with us, somebody like Silken Laumann, and she's not the greatest rower that Canada's ever produced, but she's probably the most famous because she endured an injury, she overcame it, and still was able to produce an Olympic medal just was it months after having a very severe accident, or remembering Joanie Rochette when she skated in 2010, right after her mom had passed away. Alexander Bilodeau, yes, he won the first gold medal for Canada, but what people want to talk about is how beautiful the relationship with him and his brother were. And so I think that human side is what makes us feel connected. Gold medals, most people don't relate to gold medals, and we're in awe and we're entertained by gold medals, but people want to feel a personal connection to athletes. And then that was what makes them inspired and really want to root for them. So I think that for all of us Paralympians, having a disability is part of our story, and how we manage that disability, how we acquired a disability. So I think it's really normal for the world to be curious about a disability and how we live with the disability. And so I don't think that by any means we need to remove that from the story. It's just how we talk about it. And it's in the context of being a high performance athlete. And then it's, when somebody is amazed at, being inspired and amazed because you feel sorry for somebody versus being inspired and amazed because you're wowed by it's just such a different tone. And so I think that for me, I want to keep talking about people's lives because I want to be inspired by a human, not by a medal. So whether it's disability or not, I want to know about our athletes, and I want those stories to get out there, as long as it's not being done in any sort of way that's patronizing or, we don't want to infantilize Paralympic athletes because they're doing incredible things. And it's not to say, oh, good for you for participating. It's holy crap, I can't believe this high performance athlete, Olympian or Paralympian. So I think for me, it's just a tone and the way that the context is framed. But humans are interesting and inspiring. And I think that humans are way more interesting than, sport is so trivial. Whether you're going up and down a pool moderately fast or putting a ball in a hoop, it's all trivial. We might as well be trying to catch gummy bears in our mouth, right? It's not necessarily the sport that's interesting and inspiring. It's the humans that are making it so magical. So I think that we can't ever forget that human side, but just to talk about it in a way that has dignity and respect and high performance as its lens.
Do you know what? There's a great comment. Jose is on a roll today. She's talking about how that connection that you're talking about is what makes sport so much more compelling. Tell me about that human factor. Have you experienced it yourself in ways that surprise you?
Great question. Absolutely. Sport brings me to tears all of the time. And I think that for me, one of the biggest moments that I found surprising in Paralympic sport was at the London 2012 Games. And it was the first games that I had attended as a spectator. I had retired from swimming. And so I went to the games to do a little bit of work with the Paralympic committee, as well as attend the games as a spectator. And to see how the people in the public were receiving the Paralympic Games brought me to tears every single day. And it was the first time I feel that I saw the Paralympics being treated on equal footing to the Olympics. So for example, during the Olympics in London, there was like a 4-story advertisement of Usain Bolt. I don't know if it was a Nike ad or what it was, but then in the Paralympic Games, the exact same size, 4 stories of an apartment building of a swimmer named Ellie Simmons. And Ellie is a little person. And so for me, that brought me to tears because she's short statured. So for her whole life, she has figuratively, as well as literally, been looked down upon. And then now her entire country was looking up to her in so many different ways as a hero, and then physically looking up at this 4-story advertisement. And the power of that, the power to see something turned on its head that way. And for somebody, like for an entire community of people who've been underestimated and looked down upon, suddenly be looked up to. In every bar, on every newspaper stand, Paralympics was front and center. And then the best part, the most surprising, I think, was I was on the subway and there was a group of guys, maybe late teens, early 20s, looking really cool. And somebody said something like, "Oh, are you going to the bar later? Are we going to meet up?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm catching wheelchair rugby. I got to catch the game." it was just so awesome that Paralympic sport was suddenly cool and it was mainstream and it was everywhere. And it was surprising. It brought me to tears.
You know what's so interesting? Douglas Van Duzer is commenting about, for him, Paralympians are more of an inspiration than Olympians. They've achieved greatness, but have overcome so much more. How do you respond to that?
I always want to be careful not to do that comparison game, Olympics versus Paralympics, because at the end of the day, it's every athlete is so individual. And I think that every medal and every performance is so meaningful, but in different ways to different athletes, because every athlete has overcome different things to get to their performance or their medal. And I think that a lot of Olympians have overcome an incredible amount, whether they've come from low-income families or they had people who didn't believe in them or injuries. I don't think we can discount Olympians. But having said that, a lot of Olympians, at least in their bodies, we see these bodies that were designed to be powerful and in a sports system that was designed for bodies that don't have disabilities. So for a Paralympian, it is this added level of not only overcoming whatever, because a Paralympian could come from a low-income family, have people who don't believe in them, or have injuries or illnesses. But then also on top of that, the social disclusion, the world that is not accessible, and just the everyday difficulty of living as a person with a disability. Every single Paralympian has that. So all athletes are different and have overcome different things to get to where they are. But the Paralympic community feels like so much more of a community in that camaraderie, because there is that common, commonality of the world underestimating you and all of us having to go that extra level of believing in ourselves and overcoming those misconceptions and disbelief in us. So I think there is something really beautiful about the Paralympic Games. But having said that, just being careful of that comparison game. But the Paralympics is just so incredibly beautiful, and it's about so much more than sport. And we're seeing the Paralympic Games have this trickle effect and this global impact on the way people, like you said, Teddy, view abilities, inclusion, diversity. So I think the Paralympics is it's a very beautiful tool for global change.
Stephanie, this is such a fascinating conversation, and we could go on for hours about this. I love this conversation, but couple of final things I want to ask you about. One is, the Canadian team hasn't been announced yet, so it's probably not fair to pick out individual stories yet. But to try and gear up people to think ahead to what they might be able to look ahead to some of the athletes and some of the people with amazing stories that perhaps they should be watching. Are there a couple of stories that you would kind of highlight for folks in terms of what they should be looking at over the next year and athletes that they might want to be watching out for?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was very fortunate to have been the chef de mission for the 2019 Pan American Games in Lima last summer, as well as heading now into 2021 Paralympic Games. So I've had a chance to get to know a lot of our athletes, and we, like you said, we haven't announced our team yet, so we don't know exactly who's going to be going to the games. But athletes to watch out for over the next year. One of my favorite moments of 2019 is that the first time in history, a female athlete became #1 in the world in boccia. So boccia is a sport that both genders compete against each other. So there's not separation. There's not men's and women's. Everyone competes. And the first time in history, a female became #1 in the world, and that female was Canadian, Alison Levine, and she trains out of Montreal. And it's huge in so many different ways, for Canada, for boccia, for gender equality. Alison is just such a badass, and I cannot wait to see what she's going to do this year. Something exciting about 2021 is we're debuting Badminton in the Paralympic Games. So that's a really exciting sport to watch out for. And hopefully we'll have some Canadians who will be able to participate as the first ever Canadians to be Paralympians in Badminton. We have a very strong cycling team. We, on the track, in the velodrome, as well as on the road, we produce medals every single Paralympic Games. And so there are so many athletes to watch out for in cycling. And then Nathan Reich in athletics. He's world record holder in the 1500 meters as well as the 800 meters. And just an awesome guy, a great athlete. And hopefully breaking some more world records this year. But he's also just a great leader for Team Canada. And during COVID, I know he's been reaching out to so many different athletes to make sure they felt connected. And that's what I love to see. Like we said before, performances are great, but we're looking for high performance humans. And Nathan is such a great leader on our team. And he shows incredible class and high performance on the field as well as off the field.
I know Nathan a little bit as well, and he comes actually from a real sporting family. I think 4 or 5 of his relatives were professional hockey players and baseball players, and you name it. And
both his parents were Olympians. Yeah.
Sorry? Both of his parents were Olympians. Yeah, I mean, just an incredible story there.
And we had Alison on the show.
Yeah, and Alison was on our show.
It was amazing.
And you are absolutely right. An incredible ambassador, an incredible story, and somebody definitely worth watching. One final question before I let you go today, and I want to get really granular here with you because I think you can offer so much to so many people. This whole hour, we've talked about resiliency. And I wonder if you could share 5 of your top tips of how you would recommend people stay resilient in these times.
Awesome. Yes. I like to live my life very intentionally because I've struggled with mental health, with my mental health, as well as just just feeling like a worthwhile human, with a disability. I think that struggle to feel like I was enough was something that was always present in my life. So I always try and be very intentional. And when I live my life intentionally, I feel like I can tackle my mental health a lot better, as well as have feelings of pride and like I am enough as a woman with a disability. And so the things that have helped me throughout my life, as well as now leading into COVID, for building and staying resilient, I would love to share those with you. And the first and foremost is a support system. So I find that I'm incredibly influenced, and I think that I'm not alone in this, by the people who are around me. And so I'm very careful who I choose to spend my time with and who I choose to get vulnerable with, who I'm leaning on for support. Because And there was some study also that said that, you know, we turn into a combination of the 5 people we spend the most time with, or we're most influenced by the 5 people we spend the most time with. So I would recommend everyone give some thought. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? And are those the type of people and values that you want to be influenced by? The second one is, and this is going to be a hard one for everyone to hear, I think, but limiting exposure to social media. And there's a wonderful online free course from Yale University about well-being and happiness. And one of the biggest things that comes out of that course in the science is how damaging social media and our exposure on a regular basis can be to our well-being. So I believe in social media. I mean, we're doing it right now. I think there's a great time and a place for it, but be very careful of what we are exposing ourselves to and how much time we're spending on social media. It plays this comparison game while we see everyone's highlights, and then we compare it to our real life experience, and that's just a no-win situation. Get outside. I cannot express this one enough. The fresh air, the trees, being outside is so healing. Being in nature, being underwater, skinny dipping. It really allows us ourselves to take a pause from the chaos and the noise that's happening in the world, and really just get inwards, fill our own cups. The healing powers of what nature has to offer us is so powerful.
This, by the way, is from Doug about getting outside and the skinny dipping. That was much earlier in the conversation, but just so you know.
I love it. And then also, I've been reading a lot of books, watching TED Talks, listening to podcasts that have inspired me. You know, and that goes back to kind of intentionally around your support system, also being intentional of what I'm being exposed to. So I've been reading some great books lately, things that are very thought-provoking and inspiring. I think that that's really important. And then last but not least, let's armor ourselves with knowledge and resources, and being careful when we see information on the internet, wondering, where is this coming from? Is this credible? Because I think that when we move forward, if we have knowledge and resources, so knowledge, what really is the situation that we're living in, and then resources, what in my community is available for me to help work through this. And a lot of times there's more resources either online or in our communities than we know about. So spending some time looking and seeing what organizations are out there and providing either free counseling or free meals or different yoga. A lot of times there's a lot of great things going on in our communities that we don't know about. And especially nowadays, there's lots of free yoga classes online that also I've been partaking in and finding really helpful. So armor yourself, knowledge as well as resources.
This has been so amazing, Stephanie. I've gotten a lot out of it. I'm sure our viewers have as well. I really want to thank you for taking this time, taking this past hour, and just sharing your story and the story of the Paralympics and where it's going and the change that it can be part of going forward. I think this has been amazing, and I want to thank you again for joining us here today.
Thank you both to you, Teddy and PJ. It's been great to chat to you guys, and I love your resiliency project. So I can't wait to see future episodes. And thanks for having some feel-good social media out there, because I think it's needed now more than ever.
I couldn't agree more. Stephanie Dixon, Canada Chef de Mission for the Paralympics coming up in Tokyo next year. Stephanie joined us from her home in the Yukon. Thanks for joining us here on the Resiliency Project. Please share our video with your friends, like our Think Redefined Facebook page, my Teddy Katz YouTube channel, and really help us spread the word about this Resiliency Project so we can share these stories as far and as wide as possible. Please join us again in another couple of weeks for another great story of resilience and reinvention here on the Resiliency Project. Thanks to Stephanie. Thanks to PJ. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.